Yeah, we can.
Okay, you started. Yeah.
Okay, but I don't know where it will go. And so you also record just for safety. I don't know
No,
where it will
it's
go.
going to cloud. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm excited.
Yeah, this is good. Thank you for doing this. Yeah.
No issues, man, no issues.
Let me see. Okay.
I've invited some friends of mine too. I don't know. I invited some a lady I met in a wedding. She was a white American. She liked it. I gave her the link. So I did invite some few people.
Okay. Yeah, right now only 4 of us.
Yeah.
Wait for 5 minutes before you start
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah, it is only 8:15 right now.
No,
No,
8:30.
8:30 it is.
Oh, is it 8:30? My time is wrong. Oh, do you want to start? Oh, it is my timing is okay. It's 8:25. Yeah, it's 8:30 now. My phone shows 8:30. Let's give it 5 minutes more then, and we'll start.
So he chose to do the presentation instead of going out for dinner for his birthday.
Glady, happy birthday, Glady.
Yeah, we didn't wish it.
Thanks. Hey, Flavian, welcome.
Happy birthday, Glady. Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. God bless you.
Hey, thanks. There we see Flavian, Lois. Just give it 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes we can start so that we respect everyone's time.
Yeah.
Hey, Glady, how are you?
Hey, good.
Happy birthday.
Hey, thanks. Like usual, you all are still on the bed?
You are always in bed.
Happy birthday, Glady.
Hey, thank you so much.
Man, you didn't tell us when we were scheduling this that today is your birthday. We would have moved it another day.
No, that is fine. It's not so important. Now, as you get older, birthday is another day.
Happy birthday, Glady.
Hey, hi, Alvin. Thanks.
Edith has joined, Glady. You
Who?
can say hi to her. Edith.
Edith joined. Hey, hi, Edith. I don't see her on this list.
She's still connecting on the audio. Wait.
Yeah.
Can't hear you yet.
Some people may not be on the camera, so it's fine. You can just carry on.
You can see them. I don't see Edith on the list.
I can see.
Okay, this is what I am seeing, then I don't know.
You have to see on your right, but you concentrate on your presentation.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Do you want me to start?
Give you a minute, just.
Yeah.
In fact, is there a way? I just want to see if anybody has gone in the other link.
I did go to the other link.
Anybody was there?
The host was not. It was not. The other link is the Sunday Mass link, right?
Oh, host is not there, so it will not
no,
start.
it is not there. Yeah.
Okay.
When Victor messaged we are on, I was like, okay, there's definitely some other link.
Many happy returns of the day, Glady. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted you guys to just introduce to Edith. I did meet Edith during a wedding, and welcome, Edith. These are my Bible group friends. We are colleagues, and we do meet for all Bible events.
Thank you.
Hi, Edith.
Hello. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Good to have you.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I think we should start because I've got a lot of slides. I want to go through it, and the others can join in, basically.
Okay, Glady.
Okay.
Before you start, Glady, let everybody else just mute. So let only Glady's mic be open right now, since we're recording.
Yeah, tell me when you guys are ready.
Go ahead, Glady. You can start.
Okay. I think today our subject is Noah's flood. Of course, we have all heard about it. This is nothing new. And but there are a lot of things which happened during the flood which many folks are not aware of, because this is not covered in our normal Bible. Basically, the Genesis talks about the flood in a very short manner. Details are not there. And the things which I have gathered here, basically, are not directly from the Bible. They, like I mentioned in the disclaimer, some of this information comes from other sources, like the old epigraphical books, the Mesopotamian scripts, the tablets, the Sumerian books. Some of them come from the Book of Jubilees. Then there is a book called the Table of Nations, the Holy Bible, and others. And let me say a small prayer before I start this. I just want to say, Lord, I ask that you stand with me through this event. Guide me to speak in your light. Help me say what the crowd needs to hear, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So,
Victor, this is-
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, like I said, we all have heard about the flood, but I just want to get into a little more depth into the flood. And once you are finished, you'll get a real idea of why God destroys this earth, which he created with such great enthusiasm and his love for the creation, basically. Why would someone destroy something which he created with such love that he says in the Bible that I created man in his own image, basically, and he had to destroy man. And God was very sad after he destroys it. You will see this in this as to why he destroys it, what was his need to destroy, and his promise to us after the destruction, basically. Okay, this is just a front slide which I have just shown. The picture which you see on the left is of a movie which is going to be released. I have basically contacted these the producers of this film, and I'm one of the small sponsors of this film too. My name will be in the credit. It's called The Ark in the Darkness, and it will be released this June, July. I will send you guys a link once they release this movie. They'll be releasing it in theaters, and then it will be free for all Bible churches and everything. I'll keep you guys informed on this. This slide, basically, I have broken up the chapters in various topics. Basically, there are a lot of things to cover as to why the flood happened. Like you see in this appendix I have, before the flood, the events in chronological order, the genealogy of Adam, the message from God to the people through Noah. Now, let me tell you that this line is very contradictory because this is not there in the Bible. But the Bible says that God warned the people through Noah, but the details are never there. How many years before he warned? Some of the old books say God warned the people about 150 years ago. He gives them time up to 150, and so that this is not properly mentioned in the Bible. So there are some things in this presentation which I have picked up from other areas. So we can have a discussion on that. How does the pre-flood world look? Basically, the pre-flood world was very different than what we have today. Today we have continents, we have so many, the atmosphere is very different. That's why things, we are grown smaller in size. And God said that my spirit shall never be with man always. And that's why he brought down man's life to 120 years, which is mentioned in the Bible. That's the reason you see Moses lived for 120, Abraham lived for Abraham lived for more, I think 170 years. But he brought down the life of a common man to 120 after. Before that, everyone lived long years. We can get into that discussion. The next one is the fallen angels, and this was the thing which happened two times. The fallen angel story happens once just after God creates the universe but doesn't create man. In between that time, there is the fall of the angels, and the second time the fall of the angels happen after man's creation too. And that's the time you have the giants and the Nephilims. And I mentioned the flesh is corrupted. I'll get into that details. This is the most important area here as to why God destroys earth. I get into the details of the flood, the first 40 days. We have always learned in school and in the Bible classes that it rained 40 days and 40 nights. And we all presume that the flood lasted only for 40 days and 40 nights. And that's what was our understanding. It was not like that. The flood, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but the flood lasted for almost a year, about 371 days the flood lasted, basically. And there were many sequences which happened during the flood, which I'll get into details, showing you some geographical evidence and all that. And I'll come to that later on. The other slide is the conspiracy of science. Today, science, the way science is built is most of the folks who have written the science were also atheists. They did not believe in the word of God. And there was a conspiracy built around science, and we'll get into that discussion. The other slide is the geographical evidence of the flood, God's promise to man, the genealogy of Noah. In the start, I showed of Adam, but it is the next is of Noah. And lastly, Noah becomes a post-flood god. I'll explain this very clearly to you. And my next presentations will be an explanation of how religion spread across the world. And that's the book I'm writing, Danny and Vines, as to how different religions basically had their gods, basically from the sons of Noah and Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah. Noah was also considered a god. I'll explain to you. Lastly, I summarize it with that the story of the flood is not a story only in your Bible. There are 157 epic stories of the flood throughout the world. There's a book on this. If anyone is interested, I can send you the name of the book. There are 157 stories, basic stories, all talking of the same flood. How can people who live with no contact around the world have their own stories of the flood? They have never seen mankind. They live in the Amazon jungles. They have not seen modern equipments, but they know the story of the flood. That means something happened before our times, and their ancestors, basically it went from mouth to mouth on a dark night, sitting around a fire, the old man's stories, and that's how it spread, basically. This is a chart on the genealogy of Adam, basically. I'm not going through this in detail. I will be sharing these slides. You can go through them. Yeah. Someone was saying something? I did hear someone wanting to say something.
Adi, someone just logged in, so
No, Glady.
you can continue.
Okay. You see, I've broken up the genealogy into two. One is before the flood and one is after the flood. Basically, the flood happens during the 600th year of Noah. Noah lives another 400 to 500 years after the flood. And the Bible very clearly mentions he was about 600 and some years. And it gives you the exact time of the 17th day of the month and all that. And here I mentioned from Adam, Adam had many sons, though the Bible just says that he had many sons in it. But Adam's first two sons, Cain and Abel, that's a different story and a different discussion of the story of Cain and Abel. I'll get into that later on. But we go from the third son of Adam, who God blesses and gives Eve, that is Seth. The Bible only lists down all the descendants from Seth. Basically, on the Cain side also, the Bible just names some of them, but we don't get into that detail. So this is a list from the Seth side. From this, you come to Enoch. Enoch is the one who never died in the list below Jared. Enoch was taken to heaven directly, basically. And there's a story in the book of Enoch where he visits Hayden and hell. This story is also in the Zoroastrian books, the Advaita. Basically, the story of it, and that story was also copied in Islam, where Muhammad goes on a night journey to heaven from the Alaska Mosque. So those are the stories copied. So basically, I'll get into that in a different discussion. Methuselah is the son of Enoch, and he's supposed to be the guy who lived the longest life, 969 years, as per the Bible. But he dies on the year of the flood because God did not want Methuselah to die as a sinner in the flood. God takes him away on the year of the flood. Lamech was his father, and then Noah and Shem. Shem was also born. We are not listing the other sons who are called Ham and Japheth. And in the right side, I have mentioned that many of you get confused when I write that, known as Brahma, Manu, Vishnu in India, 3 sons. We'll get into that discussion at a later time. Shem was also known as Bharat. In Greeks, he was called Zeus. And in Tamil literature, he was called Shaman. I'll get into all that discussion later on. And the flood happens in 1656 AM. Let me tell you, on the top, I have mentioned what is AM. AM is a Latin word called Anno Mundi. That is called year after creation. It counts the creation from the start, from when God had made Adam. Basically, this date comes from 17th century. I forget his name. There was a man in Europe who basically went back and counted the years in a reverse engineering way with all the activities. And he came up with the date that God created in 3892 BC. It's around that age. So according to the folks who believe in the creation, they believe our Earth was about 4,000 years old, 4,000 BC. That means counting the two, we are about 6,000 years in the creation, basically, if you see everything. Some of the other lists are the folks who came after the flood, and they are born directly under Shem. I'm not showing the list of the descendants of Ham and Japheth right now. You see the third one from the list is Eber. You get the Hebrew language from the word Eber. Basically, the Hebrew language was named after Heber. It is during the time of Peleg that the Tower of Babel happened, the division of the earth with language. And Peleg's son was Ru. In India, he was known as Raghu in Tamil literature. And he was the forefathers of some Semitic race, like Rama and Krishna and all that. Then you have Nahor, and Terah. Now let me come to Terah. Terah was Abraham's father. Basically, he was an idol maker for Nimrod. And if none of you know who's Nimrod, I'll get into that later on, because we are not getting into that discussion today. Nimrod was also known as Shiva in India. And Terah was a master terracotta maker. That means he made clay pots. That's the reason you have the word terracotta. Have you heard of terracotta pottery? It comes from Terah, the name Terah. Terah was Abraham's father. He was not called Abraham. He was called Abram. You see the name Brahm, also Brahman. The word Brahm is from Abraham. The word Brahm means to visualize in Sanskrit. That means you're visualizing. Iska Brahm hua. Brahm means a visualization. And then we run down the Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, basically. You have the 12 tribes of Israel from Joseph. So this is just, and Jacob, I've just written that he wrestles with God overnight. And he steals a blessing from his brother Esau. We'll discuss it later. This slide, before the flood, there's a warning from God. Like I said, God tells Noah to warn the people to come back to worship. It is not defined anywhere how long God gave the warning, but it is said in some books that he warns through Noah about 150 years before the flood, because it takes about 75 years for Noah to build the ark. Now, these are all numbers which are there in some apocryphal books, so don't quote me for that. And here I mentioned the flood happened 1650 years after the creation. And this is the time the first fall of Lucifer happens. The fall of Lucifer happens before the creation of man. When God had created the earth, it was void with water. Now, this is very important to read. This thing also comes in the Hindu literatures. Oh, I'm sorry. God said in the Bible that in the starting, the earth was filled with water and his spirit hovered about the water. If someone has read the Bible, you'll know that. Basically, God punishes the angels and puts them in the abyss of the sea. Basically, he curses Adam and he puts him in the depth of the sea. And that's the reason today you see a lot of UFOs and strange activities in the sea. And we'll come to another chapter later on in my next discussion of how the creatures from the sea basically came to destroy man. That is Satan, who has his kingdom in the depth of the ocean. Here I mentioned the earth was filled with corruption and sin in every form, and there were huge giants living on the earth in those days, which were the creation of fallen angels. There's a story in the Bible of 200 angels coming down on Mount Hermon, and God sends these angels to keep a watch over the man, basically to protect man and to keep a watch over this man. That's why they are called the watchers. But these heavenly angels, when they came down, they were so impressed with the daughters of men that they changed their form and got into human bodies and married these daughters of men. And they say the mixing of both created giants on this earth. And the giants are mentioned in the Bible. This is not a fairy tale. You have the king of Bashan, you have Atak the king, you have Goliath the giant, so Goliath the giant, and many others are there. And there are some things which I'll show you in the Bible which basically proves that there were giants on this earth. Science has proved it. They have found it. But there's a big conspiracy in science that even the museum today, we have what you call the Smithsonian Museum. They have hidden all these bones which we have found. There's a big conflict between science and religion, basically. God tries to, this is what when the giants who basically were born out of this relation, they started devouring men and animals for their food. And there was like God said, there was only evil on this planet and the flesh was corrupted. This is what God meant by the flesh is corrupted. And I'll get into little depth what you mean by flesh is corrupted. And man is doing the same mistake again. We are playing with DNA today. And I will show you in my slides what's happening. And this is a very important, the last word which in the Bible is mentioned, that God said to Satan, the seed of the woman will destroy Satan. And that is the reason Satan wanted, with his angels, wanted to destroy the creation of man. So the seed of the woman will not come to destroy him if he creates God's original creation. And we'll get back to that later on. This is just a saying from the Bible where God says, the end of all flesh is come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them. I behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Remember that last word. I will destroy them with the earth. That means the earth will destroy man. In the 600 years of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the Bible is very specific of the day and the month. So this is not just a fairy tale. The writer of the Bible gets very depth. And the same day where all the fountains of the great deep broke up, we have to give a very importance to this. What does he mean by the fountains of the great deep broke up? I'll get into that detail soon. And the windows of the heaven were opened. These two things, just keep it in your mind. I'll get into more discussion in that, because that's how really happened. And science also agrees that these two things happened. Before the flood, God made the perfect world. There was no sins. All animals were vegetarian. There were no lions also. In the Revelation, it is mentioned in the ending days, the sheep will lie down with the lion. That is what was in Eden. Basically, God made a perfect world where the animals did not kill each other for food. And that is the beauty of God's creation, that you see such a huge animal like the dinosaur, the theropod. It was standing as tall as a building, but it did not eat animals. It ate plants. That's the beauty of his creation. He created. So you have to believe what the Bible says, that God created everything and there was no one killing each other. And God divided the waters between the top and the bottom, the firmament of the sky. This means that when God created the earth, he split up the water into two areas. One is the sea, and one, he created a firmament of water, vapor above the earth, and that held the radioactive waves from the earth coming down and destroying our cells. And that allowed the oxygen in the planet to be more. When oxygen is, and this is also proved by science, you can read this. When there is more oxygen on the planet, everything grew big. And that's the reason you see in the fossils, there are big, big butterflies and big, big animals. Even humans were big. They say even Noah was about 15 to 20 feet man. So everything grew very huge because the world was perfect. We lived for centuries because our body couldn't be, our cells couldn't be destroyed by the radioactive waves coming from the sun. It was protected with the firmament in the sky. The water protected and diverted the rays from the sun, harmful rays from the sun. Man was created to live forever in this world, that is Eden, but his original sin, the original sin is another discussion for another day, brought death and suffering to this world. Mutation built up with every generation, bringing down the age of the man. Basically, what we are seeing today, cancer and all that thing, is nothing but your cells mutating. And this is nothing that this was our punishment given after the flood. Basically, our cells are mutating, and that's the reason we have cancer and other diseases. But this was deliberately done after the flood, so that, like God's promise, he said his God will not be with man all the time. There are some things which you can go through. I'm not getting in detail. Because I have to go through all the slides, but I go to some of them. It took Noah about 150 years to build the ark as per God's instructions. The 3 sons of Noah married on the year of the flood. Now, this is also a very important thing to say. Noah was considered a very pious person by God. Noah was chosen by God, and God chose Noah and his sons. And I presume at that time Noah had a wife, but his children were married on the year of the flood. Now, these are information that doesn't come from the Bible. It may be true, it may not be true, but this is what I have found out. Methuselah dies in the same year of the flood. Noah carries the garment. This is one thing which I have read in one of the epigraphical books. When Adam and Eve did the first sin, God covers them with the garment, and because they feel shy, because they have seen their nakedness. And God kills an animal to clothe Adam and Eve. And that garment was passed on from generation to generation, from Adam to Noah. And Noah is said to have carried this garment with him on the ark. And there's a later on story of how Ham steals this garment because this garment had miraculous power. And Ham did steal this. There's another story for that. The wood which was used to make this ark, God gives a special instruction to Noah to usually gopher wood. And remember, this gopher wood is not present in today's world. It is supposed to be like the Lebanon teak wood, but we don't have this gopher wood today in today's world. We don't have this wood around. It may have been a special wood which God himself, as an engineer, as a designer, told Noah to use this, basically. God only instructed to take the land-dwelling animals, 2 of every kind and 7 of the clean animals. 2 of every clean animals and 7 pairs of unclean animals. I may be confused here, but this is how God instructed, not to take any other. There's no sea creatures taken into the ark. Most of the animals taken into the ark were small animals. That means they had to survive the flood and repopulate the earth. Adults were not taken into the ark, basically. And one more thing, the animals did not come to the ark. Noah did not have to go run around and fetch them. God sent them to the ark by his miracles and power. Basically, they walked and came to the ark. This is what I mean by the flesh got corrupt. Now, look at some of these pictures. These are not paintings of some artist who took a peg or 2 or drank some beer and in his imagination he painted this. These are some of the things which our forefathers seen at one time. Remember, when you go to some old historic sites, you see something very odd. They did not paint those things out of their imagination. Man has always tried to portray something which he has always seen with his eyes, or his ancestors seen with his eyes. So these are some of the, like that, at the right side, you see the Lion Man. There is a lot of stories on the Lion Man before the flood, and even after the flood. This is what I mean by mixing the genes, which we are already doing today. And you'll be surprised that in China and Russia, There were attempts to mix man's genes with ape genes. There's called man was mixed with an ape. And in the 1960s, that story is still available on the internet. So we are trying to play God, and we're trying to do the same mistake again, for which God destroyed this earth, basically. The fallen angels basically knew how God created man, basically how the DNA and all that stuff, because they were there at the time when God created this universe and did the creation. So they had an idea, and that's how they taught man all these secrets. And that's why God got angry with the fallen angels. That's the reason he punishes them. It was not just because they married the woman of the daughters of men. It was this thing that they tried to corrupt his creation. I want to quote something from Matthew 24, where it says, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. That means that when Jesus Christ is ready to come back to deliver us, in those days, we will be the same like the men who were there before the flood. So beware, everyone should know that we are coming to that stage. It is written there in the chapter 24, 38. For in those days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. I have put a link there where in modern day, man is trying to mix DNA of animals to bring various creatures. Today, we already know that a tiger can be mixed with a lion and gets a tigon and a lot of mixed creatures are there. Basically, in a tiger and a male, female, and all that. So we are already trying to play God here. Look at the below photograph. Now that is a man with a body of a lion and a horse. Now this is what the ancient Assyrians used to worship. They used to call it the shed. Basically, it's called the shed, but it was a sort of a god which they worship. Islam did copy this in the travel of Muhammad to heavens to get his 5 prayers. Basically, is one of this, the shed. In Deuteronomy, it clearly says, Deuteronomy 17, they sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods that were never known, to new gods that have come recently, whom your fathers have never dreaded. These two are called Shedu or Lamasu in the Assyrian language, basically. The fallen angels. We come to this story here, like I said, after Adam and Eve were sent down to earth, punished by God. The Bible says that they had a son after the death of Cain and Abel and moved away and set up a kingdom with the help of Cain moves away and sets up a kingdom with the help of fallen angels and makes a generation of people from whom Tubal Khan, who was the forefather of weapons. Now, I was telling you the fallen angels taught man how to, the art of astrology, how to make weapons, how to get medicines, how to dig gold, even what you call makeup was taught by the fallen angels. Remember, makeup was not a woman thing in the old days. Makeup was mostly done by men. So let's not have confusion and any woman get any upset that makeup means it is bad. Makeup was in the Egyptian time, your mascara, your high heel shoes, your rouge which you put on your face. These were all used by the pharaohs, basically. High heels were used in Europe for butchers. Your mini skirt was used by Romans. Your sandals were rolled by Roman soldiers. So women just stole everything from men. Today, we are left with only a pant and a shirt. It was during the time of Gerard that God sent 200 angels descended from the Mount Hermon to watch over his creations called the Watchers. And I told this story before, so I'm not going to repeat this. These Nephilims were the huge giants in size and would reach the height of mountains. Now, this sounds very fairy tale to me, but I did a lot of research. And at one time, I'll show you the huge trees which were on Earth as huge as mountains. There are some still fossilified, became fossils, and they are in Arizona too. And I'll show that sometime later, not today. The size of the giant before the flood is not mentioned in any book, but the Bible mentions the highest they was 30 feet. This is a version of the Lion Man god from India. These images were visualized by survivors of the flood to the new generation, and that's how we have the new flood generation worshipping these forms. The below photograph is of the Baal god. I don't know if anyone has heard of Baal. Baal was also a previous god for sacrifice. It was a bull god. That was the god who the Canaanites and the Israelites worshipped during the Exodus, the bull, and which God punishes them. Later on, the Baal god was also worshipped as Hubal. Hubal becomes Allah. So there's a lot of story behind all this. He was also known as Molech and Chemosh in the Bible. Okay, this, I think I'm repeating the same thing again here. Like I mentioned here, the angels from the first fall were during the revolt with God's favorite angel, that is Michael, the archangel Michael defeats, you must have heard of the story, the Greek story called the Clash of the Titans. Basically, that is nothing but a fantasized version of the story which our forefathers told before the flood and after the flood, of stories how giants fought each other and the angels fought with Satan. Basically, this is all comes from those stories, the Clash of the Titans. Basically, in the Bible, it mentioned the archangel destroys Satan and punishes him to the depth of the ocean. Basically, God punishes him in the depth of the ocean. Here I mentioned the reason for why Satan wanted to corrupt the flesh. I did mention before too. The fallen angels, together with man, tries to mix the seed of the woman with animals and other beings, and that's the reason science today finds so many type of man. But we cannot find Homo sapiens, you know that. The missing link, what science called the missing link, we'll never find because we never came from monkeys. But our genes was always mixed, and that's the reason you find a lot of Neanderthals and the different type of species. You have so many species before the sapiens came into the world. We are coming from Homo sapiens, but we had Neanderthals and so many other type of humanoids before us. That's all the proof of how the angels basically mixed and corrupted God's creation so that this wouldn't be fulfilled. The seed of the woman will crush his head. This is what God promised in Genesis, basically. So that, and Satan knew that Jesus was the seed of the woman which will come to crush him. Basically, here God talks of his son Jesus, who will come one day through a woman and will crush the head of Satan. This is what he prophesied here, basically. And Satan wanted this not to come through. And this is the game he plays to change God's creation and corrupts his whole universe which he created. Here I briefly go into who are the Nephilim. Now the word Nephilim is a Hebrew word called Nephal. Nephal means to fall. Now in Hebrew, the fallen angels are called as Nephilim because they are the fallen ones who God sends down to earth, and they take the daughters of men because they were impressed with that. But I believe that was not the only reason why God punishes them. The other reason is because the fallen angels give away the secret of heaven to mankind. And remember, there is a chapter in the Bible where one of the 12 apostles of Jesus questions Jesus to explain how is it in heaven. And Jesus says only one word: there are some things which man should never know. So the same way, the angels gave away the secrets of heaven which God did not like. And that was one of the reasons God punishes them for 10,000 years and in the depth of the ocean. And they will be judged again by Jesus when he comes back on the resurrection day. That will be, if they regret, the angels will be forgiven by Jesus, or they will be put into eternity, into the eternal fire forever. You can go through this, and I'm not getting into details in this. Here I mentioned a clear thing of the fall of Adam and Eve, where God says, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than the beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. But I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. This is the promise which God told Satan that he will bring his only son into this world to punish Satan. Basically, this is all about Jesus. I've talked a little bit of the Nephilims here, the giants and everything mating a daughter. Some of the examples I give here is the king Og of Bashan, Goliath, Anak and his sons. Now, Anak and his sons are mentioned in the story of Moses. When Moses, after the Exodus, he and his team comes to Israel, and he sends some spies to see, because the Canaanites were ruling Israel at that time, and they were shocked to see how huge the Canaanites were. In the Bible, it mentions very clearly that they felt themselves like grasshoppers in front of them. That suggests how huge they were. There were a lot of other tribes who came from these giants, and that's the reason you see so much bloodshed in the Bible. Many non-Christians ask me, why is your God so angry in the Bible? Why is he killing so much? He doesn't even spare children in the Bible. I tell to them very clearly, you have to understand the reason for why God wanted to kill. There is a statement in the Bible where God tells Moses not to even spare the children and the animals and everyone in that, destroy them all. It looks like our God was so blood hungry, and that statement looks very bad. But when I did read into the depth, I realized what God had a purpose to destroy them, because he wanted to destroy the bad blood which came out of these giants and the Nephilims. Some of the people who came from these tribes were the Amorites, the Anakims. You hear all this in the Bible. God wanted these all to be destroyed because they all had Nephilim blood in them. God just wanted to keep the pure blood till the time Jesus, his son, is born. So that's the reason you see so much of destruction in the Bible. You see, they say the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament is very different. The God which Jesus talks in the New Testament is a very holy God. The God who talks about in the Old Testament is a very angry God. He very clearly says, "For I am a jealous God. There shall be no other gods, for I am a very jealous God," he says. So it looks very different in both the gods. In the Old Testament, the sheep died for the shepherd, and in the New Testament, the shepherd dies for the sheep. So there's a big difference. Here is just a picture of, I've tried to show how bad the giants had become, how huge they were. And here is the mention in the Bible. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak. This is at the time of Moses, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sights as grasshoppers. And so we were in their sight. The Bible's today, this is our maximum 6 feet. Even today, I am not 6 feet. But the Bible says there were giants up to 36 feet. Now, this is something which, if you have to believe it, is a matter of faith. The early Canaanite giants scale in Amos 2.9. Okay, so this is, and this can be discussed later on. I get into little details of the flood. Before the flood, it never rained on the earth. There was water vapor created by God to water the whole earth. And it is said that it never rained. The first time it rained was during the flood. The waters which were placed on the firmament above broke and poured down as rain. That is in the first 40 days. The fountains of the deep opened up. The sea floor split up and sprouts of water poured out from the earth. Basically in a supersonic blast. Now, what I'm going to say here is a little hard to digest, but bear with me here. Today we see the deep sea floor ridges, which are seen even today if you go into the internet or see videos. And science has agreed that there are deep sea ridges which are still wide open, basically. This is where the Bible says that the fountains of the deep broke up. The explosion was so huge that it sent up so much of dust, rocks into the air that it even blasted the moon. If you know the history of the moon has craters only on one side of the earth, and that's the side facing the earth. The dark side of the moon does not have craters, and science has no explanation for that, because science says these are meteorites that crashed on the moon. If they are meteorites which crashed on the moon, why should there not be meteorites on the dark side of the moon? There are no meteorites on the dark side of the moon, no craters there. The craters are only on the front side of the moon, because at the time of this explosion, the rocks was so powerfully thrown out that it hit the moon. Second proof of it, when Neil Armstrong went to moon, he collected stone samples and brought down to Earth. And you know what was the surprise? That the scientists said that the rocks which he brought down from moon, there's a number of the rocks which he bought, they were all of the Earth's origin. They were all rocks from the Earth. And science has a different explanation for that. Science says that the reason the rocks were of Earth origin is because at one time moon was a part of Earth. Now that is a fairy tale story. I don't believe in it, but that's a discussion for another day. The Earth rained for 40 days and 40 nights, continuous. It poured from both, from the firmament as well as from the ground up. So you can imagine it rains for 2 days and all our roads are filled up here. If it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, it filled up the highest mountains. Now, so many people will be asking, Glady, how does water go and fill up the highest mountains? Let me tell you, when God created the universe, there were no continents. There was one continent, and science also agrees there was Pangaea. And before Pangaea, there was Gondwana and all that. According to science, our planet has been splitting and coming together many times in this millions of years. But as per our Bible, there was one continent at that time. It was called Eden, which God blessed. And it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. At that time, there were no huge mountains. The mountains basically are created on this planet because of continental shifts, where our Himalayas were created because of the Indian plateau hitting the Asian plateau, basically with force. And that gave rise to these mountains. And today, Himalaya is still growing. And that's the reason you see seashells even on the top of Mount Everest. They found seashells on the top of Mount Everest. For that, science has another explanation saying that they agree that the mountains grew after the tectonic plates hitting each other. But they don't agree that that happened during the flood. God puts all the animals in the deep sleep. Today, you have seen that bears hibernate. A lot of animals hibernate. So this is not a miracle. God knew that Noah couldn't feed all the animals, take care of their waste, look at them, feed them. God takes care of all this and puts the animals, once they come into the ark, into a total hibernation. He makes the animals come to by his power to the ark, and he puts them to a deep sleep. Now, during this, like I said before, the flood did not last for 40 days and 40 nights. It lasted for 371 days. And during that time, lot of various stages of activities happened, which I can go into my next slide. Because of this explosion of the rocks, water into the higher atmosphere, with sudden force, there was instant freezing when this reached a high altitude. Folks who have worked in science knows that at the higher altitudes, you get freezing. Even an aircraft, when it fries up, you will get freezing, water ice and all that in the air. And because of this shooting, the water which was thrown up from the oceans instantly froze, and they came down as huge ice pieces, which actually froze the oceans and the seas instantly. Basically, our water always freezes from the top. But when they found fossils of dead animals, they found that the water froze from the below up. I'll show you that in slides. You may not understand by me saying it, but I'll show that in my ahead slides. I say the continent drift happened, and before the flood, all continents were one Pangaea. Pangaea means, the science calls it, Pangaea is one continent. The last I mentioned is, we should come into towards the end. That's after 150 days. I will not get into this. I'll get into later on, because this should be at the last. Here I go through what happened in the first 40 days. And this is just what I just said. Explain to you. I have given it, and you can go through this when you read this. This is what here, Rachel said, the waters which were thrown into the atmosphere created instant ice to fall back as huge hailstorms, which froze lakes and oceans instantly, and many animals immediately, as shown in the pictures next. this is a timeline of how the flood happened, basically. Here it says in the second month of the 17th day, the fountains, oh, sorry guys. The fountains of the deep broke open and the windows of the heaven were opened. When God mentioned that, he opened the firmaments. Below is a picture where I see, I don't know how clear it is. You can see the water gushing up here. The water came up from the ground in such force that it shot up water, rocks and ice right up to the outer space of moon too. So you can feel the impact of the explosion, basically. And here we have a small chart of when the fountain started, when the rain stops. You can go through this in your spare time and see it. The water recedes after 150 days. This is the time when God tells, this is the time when the ark comes to a halt on the Mount of Ararat. And Noah sends first a raven, and the raven comes back with nothing. Again, after 7 days, he sends the raven again, and the raven doesn't come back. And again, after 7 days, he sends a dove, and the dove comes back with a leaf in his mouth. And that's the reason we have the raven as a sign of Satan, and the dove as a sign of Jesus, basically. In that, that's another discussion anyway. Here you have the water receding. It takes 228, 314 days for the water to drain out. Now you can imagine so much time it is taking. It was not 40 days and 49. And this carved the earth in such a way with the huge water rushing away is what you call the Grand Canyons too. Many people just say no, the Grand Canyon was carved with water, even science agrees, but not with the Colorado River. The Colorado River starts on the east side, and Grand Canyon is sitting at a 6,800 feet. Rivers don't run upwards, rivers run downwards. So we'll get into that discussion later, but these receding waters basically created the Grand Canyons. The final days of the flood, like I said, it lasted for about 370 days. And this is where this is a statement from the Bible, basically a verse from the Bible where it says it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, that the waters were dried up from the earth. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Okay, here I get into the conspiracy of science in a little bit. Now, Charles Lyell was the first person in 1894 who wrote a book on the geography of Earth. He was an atheist, basically. And it is because of Charles Lyell that Charles Darwin was impressed during his college days. You know, Charles Darwin was what do you call? He was just a guy who was a dropout of school. He did nothing. So his father put him on a vessel which was going on a what do you call a botanical tour, and that's how he got the chance to visit the Galapagos Islands. And he wrote his book on the evolution of human beings, of the what do you call the evolution theory. What he wrote, right? Now here I just mentioned something. Here we have David Rock, who wrote in the years after Darwin. His advocates hope to find predictable progression of fossils. In general, these have never been found. That means he's trying to say that what Darwin's theory was has never been proved. Yet the optimism has dried hard and some pure fantasies has crept into textbooks. Here we have Peter Lewis, who's the director of the Strandberg Zoological Museum, who writes, "Evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. The theory has helped nothing in the progress of science. It is useless." You know what Charles Lyell said? He said, we have to get rid of evolution and the science of Moses. Here what he says, the geological column was invented by Charles Lyell, whose hidden agenda to free the science of Moses. So you can go through this as to how great people had their thoughts on how science is trying to have a conspiracy. Here you see Charles Darwin telling us to keep quiet. He knows that he's telling the lie. And here you have Karl Popper, who says evolution is not a fact. Evolution doesn't even qualify as a theory or a hypothesis. It's a metaphysical research program, and it's not really testable science. So you have many people who are very in the field of science who understand that there is a conspiracy to take away the word of God, basically here. Here, I want to show you some pictures here. This is in Siberia. They found these frozen animals who died instantly out of freezing. Your rivers don't freeze easily. You look at the second picture. This was also in Siberia, in China. This was in China, rapid freezing. They found about a herd of buffaloes who were swimming in a lake and who were frozen immediately. Rivers don't freeze immediately unless there was a catastrophic event. Here they say they were trying to swim across at the moment of freezing and had been unable to disengage themselves. Their bodies were held fast in the ice. They look as if they were still swimming. They died immediately. This shows how when the explosion happened and the water froze and came down, it instantly froze the earth in ice. Here you see at the right, you see that this is a fossil of an animal who dying in the mud, which came during the flood. And you see how he died gasping for air. This picture sealed in stone can tell you the whole story, basically. How he's dying for air and he's getting covered by mud of the Noah's flood. This is the photograph of the rock which Neil Armstrong bought from the moon. And science said that the oldest rock found on moon was of the Earth origin. The Earth rock found on the moon during the Apollo mission. This is the number which these rocks are missing today. Let me tell you, someone stole them from NASA, and that's a shame. Now I feel this is a theory. This was stolen because atheists don't want us to prove that God's words are true. This surprising from NASA how the rocks bought from moon by Neil Armstrong were stolen. They have all the best security in the world in America, but thieves could steal the stone away. Surprising and sad. Okay, this is one other explanation I would like to give you to prove that the flood happened. On the far left is a photograph of a tissue. Now, this is not tissue of a living man. This was a tissue extracted from a dinosaur, a dead dinosaur. And as per science, this dinosaur should have died millions of years ago, millions. And no human cell will last for millions of years. Even scientists agree, human cells can never live for and survive for millions of years. It will decay. But during recent search, they found these elastic, when they were elastic, that means they did not die millions of years ago, they died some 1,000 years ago. This is one proof. Now, this is a photograph of a dinosaur which was found in Montana, and it's called the graveyard of dinosaur in Montana and Wisconsin. There is a full graveyard, and I'll explain to you. This is the place. You see this here? Basically, the waters, when it came in, it gathered all the bones and all the dead dinosaurs to one place, and this is called the graveyard of the dinosaurs. And also the dead trees were collected here. All the huge trees before the flood, and that's why America is the largest producer of coal today. Our coal deposits here are very high. We are the largest producer of coal because of the water during the flood. And there is when the water was receding, there is another story to it. I will tell it to you in the next slide. This is a picture of how the tectonic plates moved during the flood, causing rampant volcanoes, movements of the sea, and all that which happened. You can go through this. One interesting fact of the dinosaur is they did find only adult dinosaurs in the graveyard of dinosaurs. There were no young dinosaurs with them. That makes the impression that during the flood, the adults left their children in their eggs or wherever they were, and they were trying to escape the flood. And during that escape, they only all together died, and only adults were found during this. That means no children were found, no small animals were found, because they might have left their young ones somewhere to die. They were running for their life. The bottom picture is what you call today, we have the tectonic plate shifts. This is where the fountains of the deep burst open. And this is not a myth. This is there. You can go in the internet, see all this. You can see it is still brewing hot gases in the sea, which you see today. Like I said, all the trees which were brought together to one side created the coal belt in America here. And during the recession, when the waters came down, after the 150 days, when the water was receding, the water receded with all the dead trees, the animals, and today we have what we call a sandbar on the Gulf of Mexico. This is where today all the oil companies are drilling oil. Because of all the dead trees, dead animals during the flood, they all decayed here and got converted into oil. This is a full where in America's oil reserves are, what we call the sand depths here in the Gulf of Mexico. This is a photograph of a stone in the Mount Everest. You can see here the seashells. This proved that Everest was once below the oceans. This is a photograph of how the oceans rose after the tectonic plates hitting each other. At the left here, I show this is called Pangaea. This was God's Eden, which he destroys during the flood. And we have today our modern continents today, Antarctica and all that stuff. It's a nice read. You can go through this. I don't want to go because you have got a lot to cover. Here I show a geographical evidence of what happened. This is the pit tars, basically. You can see all the bones here. How did all the animals which never lived together in their life, they would never live next to each other. Some of the animals found here never tried to intermingle with other animals. They used to keep far away from those animals. All those animals like a lion, tiger, zebra, you have animals which will never stand in front of a lion, and all were found in this tar pit. This shows that how the water and the mud basically got all the animals together with the rush and buried them all at one places. You can see this here, basically. Here you have the geographical stages of how the earth was flooded. Like I said, there were many sequences. There are scientific terms for that. And I don't want to confuse you all with the scientific terms. They were called the Zuni layer and all that. At one sequence, the earth was filled with layers. You see here the red layer, then it filled with another layer, then it filled with a third layer, then another layer. That's how what you call the sedimentary rocks were created. And we have the layers prove this did not happen millions of years ago. Because if it happens in millions of years ago, you would see burrows that, if there is a land, you will see animals digging into the bottoms. Basically, it creates burrows. That's how you can come to know whether instantly a second layer was created or no. There were no burrows and all that. These layers are all created in one systematic line. That shows how instantly all this was created. And the proof of all this is the Mount Helena explosion, which I can discuss with you later on. That proved the point that science was basically telling a lie, that this took millions of years to create. This did not take millions of years. This all happened within a fraction of months. These are some of the, what you call the Pumapunku in Bolivia. These are some of the ruins which were built before the flood, because till today's archaeologists don't know how these guys carried these huge stones. Now, these stones look small, but they are almost 300 to 400 metric ton, which today's man cannot live even with cranes. These were all done by the giants at those times, basically the Pumapunku and all that. Now, Pumapunku sits at a very high altitude, basically. I will discuss that in my next slide. Now, this is some of the things which are found on the base of Mount Ararat. These were the stones used by Noah in his ark to balance the ark. You can see this picture here. He had to tie the stone. This sort of balancing stones are even used today. Now, these stones were used, and they are still lying on at the base of the mountain of Ararat in Turkey. You see this man standing here, and you see this. These are the stones. Now, these carvings here were done by later on Christian people who, going to the holy sites in those times, they used to visit the ark. The ark was visible at that time. So they used to do pilgrimage to these sites. So they used to put the cross and all that. So don't misunderstand if there's a cross here. That are all done in the later stages here. And this is an article where it's in the Science magazine, is evidence of the fountain of the deep found. Okay, at some magazines do agree with the creation of God, but again, this is all still a conspiracy. After 150 days, God remembers Noah. Remember, Noah also lost faith that after 40 days and 40 nights, he was waiting for God to show what's the next step. And he did not, I wouldn't say he lost faith, but he was concerned because he did not know when to go out of the ship. Because remember, he was not told to go out of the ark till the 370 days. But God makes the water subside. That's what is written in the Bible, until the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. Let me tell you, it was not Mount Ararat. This is a range of mountains in Turkey, which is called the mountains, like the Swiss Alps. So we don't know exactly, but today we got a fair idea because we just called it Mount Ararat. But those days it was called in the mountains of Ararat. Remember, the S is there, the mountains of Ararat. It is not Mount Ararat. And on the 77th day of the second month of Noah 600, Noah builds an altar and makes a sacrifice, and God makes the covenant with Noah. This, everyone knows, God made a promise to to Noah that he will not destroy the earth again with water. This is the covenant he establishes in Genesis 9:13. I established my covenant with you, never again with all my life, never with all life will be cut off by water or a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy this earth. I have sent my rainbow in the clouds and will be the sign of the covenant between me and earth. That God made this promise that he will not destroy it again. But the next time God wanted to destroy the people who did not listen to him, he uses fire. And that is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. He doesn't use water, but he uses fire. Fire falls down in Sodom and Gomorrah at that time. This is a list of the table of nations of Noah. Basically, you can go through it. I do not want to get into these details now. I'll create separate where we'll discuss of how Noah's children basically populated the earth. We have Shem here. It is through Shem's line that we have Jesus, basically. You have Ham here, Cush. We have the Hindu Kush mountain, Kish in Ethiopia, and this Mizram is the one who set up Egypt. Put was Libya. Even in India, the Puts generations were there, who we call the Rajputs. Canaan, the Canaanites became Israel. We are also known as Kannan in Tamil literature. So, and then how there are a lot of things. Rama, the word Rama also comes from Ham's grandsons. And in India, we worship Rama. We have Siba and Sheba, which is also considered Shiva and all that. So we'll get into all that later on. But these are the how Japheth has come. In India, it was known as Prajapati. Pra means father. Prajapati. Prajapati in the Greek, he was also known as Jupiter and all that. There's a lot of stories in that. So I'll not get into detail into this. You can read this. Now, this is very interesting. After the war, the Greeks used to worship Noah with a four-faced god. Four-faced. This is one of the coins in Egypt where Noah is depicted as a god. Now, what happens is after the flood and Noah had his descendants, there were only stories they could hear from Noah and his children. And they always thought that Noah came from the sea. That's why you have a lot of stories in Greek mythology where Poseidon comes from the sea. In India, you have Pashupati creating Kerala from the sea and all that. We have a lot of stories of the sea. We can go into that later on. So a lot of sea god myths came because Noah and his sons came from the sea. And Noah did try to spread the word of Yahweh, but the word was lost later on, and that's a different discussion. This is the coin from Greece where they worship Noah as the four-faced god. Remember, for us Indians, we show Brahma with the four faces. Basically, it was a copy here. The Indians worshipped him as Manu, and his son Shem depicted Noah with the four-sided faces and called him Brahma. The god of Noah, Yahweh, was called Nar Ayan. Nar means water. Ayan is to lie. Remember in the first I said the water was there and God's spirit spread over the water. That's the meaning of this in Sanskrit. The one who lies over the waters. Nar Ayan. Today, Narayan is not much worshipped in India. They bought different gods in the 3rd and 4th century and made a total. That's why you have so many gods. We'll get into that discussion later on. In Genesis, God's spirit first lay over the water. This is what I meant by Narayan. This is a small on the various stories of the flood. This is a Greek tale of Zeus is saved in the flood. You have the Indian tale where you have Prajapati sitting with the 7 sages. Now, the 7 number is very common in a lot of religions. It's very important. You see this, they say the Saptarishi is based on the 7 stars. the 7 number comes because of also from the Bible when God tells Joshua to go around the walls of Jericho 7 times. So 7 is a big number, but here you see 8 people on this. 7 plus Prajapati is 8, and there were 8 people on the ship when in Noah's Ark. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons and 3 daughter-in-laws. There were 8 of them on the ark. The same scenario is copied here with Manu, but Manu is not shown here. It is Prajapati and the 7 sages, basically. This is the Chinese tale of Fuhi. According to Chinese tales, Fuhi and his wife and 3 daughters escaped the Great Flood. He and his family were the only people alive on that. After the Great Flood, they repopulated the world. The Chinese have a different... See, they all started calling the same story, but calling it a different name. This is the Mayan story of the flood. This is the Sumerian story. Sumerian stories have 3. They have the Gilgamesh, they have the Hathrahasis, and they have the Illuminash. Now, these are all not stories. These are all stories written, and they are today in the British Museum in stones. So you can't call them fakes. Some archaeologists say that the Bible copied the Hathrahasis and the Gilgamesh, but I don't think, because these stories were known at that time, and they might have known to each other the stories. A story of Gilgamesh is Noah was known as Utnanapashu, in that he is the one who survives the flood. So basically, this is all the copy of these stories. And like I said, there are 157 stories around the world. You can go through it. There's a book, if anyone needs, I can give you. You can buy it from Amazon. It talks of all the 157 stories throughout the world. And that's it. That's my presentation. But if everyone liked it, I would be glad. And if you have any question and answers, we can go through it now. I don't know, it's 9:30, but we can make it. And if someone doesn't have the time and have to leave, I appreciate that. We'll send you this recording. But let's open it up for question and answers if there's. I'll try my best to answer.
Thank you, Glady. That's so nice, so detailed. Like I think you put a lot of efforts. Like thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys spending your time to come and hear this.
Can I stop the recording?
If anyone has a question, so let's get the questions too, or you can stop it.
Okay. Yeah, one of the questions I have, in the first slide you mentioned like Adam and all, like 3000 some BC, but we have all this Egyptian pharaohs and all. That's more than.
No. Egyptian pharaohs, don't get confused. The pyramids were built in 2800 BC. We are talking here of 3800. Remember, BC runs backward. Don't get confused.
I know. But I thought this even some of them are more than 3000. No.
No. The Egyptian pyramids, maximum they go is to the first dynasty of Egyptian pharaohs were around 2300 or something like that. The first dynasty of pharaohs. They were not there before. The oldest pharaoh, which is written, and they don't have any proof of him, is called the Scorpion King, the Scorpion Pharaoh. They do not have much, but there is only one tablet written on the Scorpion Pharaoh, and he was the first generation of pharaohs. Rest all came after 2200 BC. They lasted till about till the time of 800 or 900 BC or something. They were there. Then the Egyptian civilization went away. I think the last was till Cleopatra during the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was supposed to be the last in the Egyptian dynasty.
Yeah. Okay.
So Glady, from what you presented, right? I mean, definitely having been close to science, a lot of facts that you presented conflict with what we have learned, through science. It's interesting, but it's also very difficult to digest just listening to it once.
Yes, it is very. The first time I did hear it, they say, to take away the conflict in your mind, do more research, do more reading. I should not be able to convince you. You should be able to convince yourself by getting into more depth. Science is good, but science is a limitation too. Science was, can you tell me, this whole world, universe is created. Do you agree that the universe works on a law and a principle? That means the earth has to go around the sun has to go around go in the universe. There is a principle set in this universe. And who set this principle? Did the principle just come from the Big Bang? Some laws in this universe are there. And who set up these laws?
No, I don't think the science even questions, the existence
So
of
today
God
they say
and all that
matter.
stuff.
Black matter is there. Do you know who created black matter? What is black matter? Just because Albert Einstein said, which is the theory of relativity, doesn't mean, because Einstein also was only guessing. All today, the pictures which you see from the Hubble telescope is not the real picture which you're saying. They are fooling you, because what the Hubble telescope is actually seeing is basically small pieces of light and ultraviolet light. That information is sent to a program which is written by humans, that if I see this light in an ultraviolet form, I create this picture. And that's how you're getting the picture of a universe in such beautiful real life. That picture is not really coming from the Hubble telescope. It is coming from the computer program. You're getting fooled.
No, I understood. The science and all aside, and the conflicting views of science and religion aside, some fundamental things, right, about the fallen angels. Why did God send the angels to earth? I mean, he has control.
He wanted his angels to watch his creation. Remember, there was now there are some things which I cannot say for and put my hand down and say, Sunil, this is what there are some things written in the old Mesopotamian scripts and some old stories, the Book of Adam and Eve, the Jewish books and all that. Now, I can go by what they say, and some things I do believe too. Religion is about faith, like Jesus said. Faith can move mountains.
Correct.
Today, even Albert Einstein cannot move mountains, but faith can move mountains, Jesus said. Now, some things are about faith, and the stories which I said about the fallen angels are there in many things. It is there in the Book of Enoch, and that is banned by the Bible, by the church, because the church found it, just like you said, they found it very unbelievable. They did not want it to clash with the church's idea. Remember, the church is supposed to be the beast in the Revelation. The Antichrist, which is there in the Bible, is not any person. The Bible calls the church the Antichrist, because the last letter given by Mother Mary during her appearance in Lourdes to Saint Benedict, which the Pope John Paul the Pope II opened in 1970, I think he opened that letter, mentioned about the church becoming corrupt. That was the third secret which she gave to Saint Benedict in a sealed envelope which she handed over to the Pope. The other two secrets she gave the world. The third one was not till John opened the letter. Pope opened the letter. So the church also has a bad history during the Middle Ages. So that's another thing. The church even changed our Sabbath day. You know that? God gives us the Sabbath on the 7th day, which is a Saturday. He said rest on a Saturday, but the church changed it and made it a Sunday. Sunday comes from the pagan sun god. We are worshipping Sunday on a sun god, not on the day which God told us to rest. So there are a lot of changes like that. Sunil?
Yeah. I mean, I've never read, these biblical verses or these Bible books in such detail as you presented today. So it's like,
the Bible
there's so much
things in codes that if you read the Revelation, you will feel like you're reading some Harry Potter. The Revelation was written in, there was a big argument during the Nicaea agreement by the fathers at that time, whether to include the last chapter, which is John's chapter, the Revelation, into the canon of the Bible, to canonize it. But lastly, it was agreed because it was too controversial. The Book of Revelation is too controversial. They say that John wrote it on the island of Patmos when he was imprisoned there, And John is the only disciple of Jesus who did not die by assassination. He died a normal death. And his book, the Revelation, is very controversial.
Yeah. I mean, I had never known. It was fascinating when you presented that in Noah's time, people lived for hundreds of years.
Yes. It's very hard for me to
The
also.
first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason for that is the way God made the planet. Like I said in my previous day, God kept a firmament about the planet, about the earth, and that was filled with water. So the harmful rays, UV rays of the sun, would not destroy our cells. And that's the reason everything grew huge. That's the reason you see fossils today of big butterflies, big centipedes. You know, do you believe you've seen those fossils of those big centipedes and big butterflies as huge as my body size? Why did they grow so big? Because oxygen was in plenty at that time. Our oxygen level has gone so low. Today in fossils, even science has proved, when they have taken the, what do you call those fossils which are frozen with, I'm not getting the word now, which are frozen with glue from the bark of the tree. In that they found oxygen molecules, and those oxygen was very high in those times. Today, the range of oxygen is very low, and our cells are getting destroyed by the UV light, and that's the reason our life is also shortened. And there is a verse in the Bible which says, I shall not be with man forever. So he keeps it to 120 years in the Bible. It is there in the book of Moses. And there's another story where Moses, when he's dying, basically he has a discussion with God as why is he taking him so early. That's another discussion where the Archangel Michael has a fight with Satan for his body. That's the reason God said, your body should be buried where no man shall ever find you. Till today, we do never have where Moses' body is, except Islam in Turkey made all dummy graves everywhere. They have graves for every prophet in Mecca. They tell that all the prophets in the Bible died in Mecca, which is a total lie.
Yep. No, thank you, Glady. It
Hey,
was
Glady,
a lot of info.
Hey, Glady, this is Manoj here. Just want to wish you a very happy birthday. Thank you for the presentation. It was really informative. Quick question regarding the ark. Just curious, and I just joined in late. Have they located where the ark is, or do they know any relic or anything out there?
It's a very controversial thing. They there are a lot of stories if you dig into the ark. In the Middle Ages, in 14th, 15th century, many people have visited the ark as pilgrimage. Josephus, the Roman writer in Josephus in the 1st century, in his book too, he writes that people visiting the Mount Ararat to see the ark. Now, when Josephus, who's a known writer, is written in the 1st century, and Josephus is the only writer who mentions Jesus. Remember, Josephus mentions, Titus mentions, and Jesus is mentioned also in the Old Testament. So when people say, where is the proof Jesus lived? These are the people who wrote about Jesus when Josephus was there, I think 60, 70 years after Jesus dying. So these guys have written about Jesus. And Josephus mentions the ark. The ark is mentioned in many of the early literatures, but suddenly after the 17th or 18th century, the ark disappears. Today, Google a guy called Ron Wyatt. He has done a lot of research on it too. And since it is in a Muslim country, they don't allow us to go and do any research. You see, the other thing is the Mount of Jesus, Mount of God, which God appears to Moses, is in Saudi, because the Bible mentions that it was in the land of Midian. Midian is Saudi Arabia. Today is Saudi Arabia. But Saudi doesn't allow you to come and see that. Because if we expose the mountain of God, then it hurts their religion too. So the sad part is all what happened in Christianity today, those lands are in Muslim control.
Yeah, that's the sad part. And just one more thing as to why did God choose Noah to build the ark?
God mentions that very when I to think about it, I presume at that time there might have been 2 million people on the earth, maybe more. That's a wild guess. But how did only God select 8 people? That's a very interesting question. Only God can answer that, I think. God mentions that Noah was very what do you call? I'm not getting the word. But God mentioned that Noah was the only one which is pious and all that mentioned in the Bible. And there is a story of how when Noah was born, he was shining like a white star. And Lamech, his father, was not there. And when he comes and he sees his son is born, he is confused as to how did he is born and I am out, and how is he so shining like a star? The one story is there in the apocryphal books about that. But I don't know how far you can believe all that, but there is a story about that. But that's a good question as to why did God chose Noah, only 8 people, and the rest were sinners. But, God did know that there were people on the planet at that time who were not fully sinners, but they were rescued by Jesus after his death. If you look at the creed of the apostles, the I believe, if you go through that, I believe, it says that Jesus died on the cross, went down to hell, and then rose up the 3rd day. That went down to hell, many people don't understand. We just we just say this prayer blindly, but the meaning of Jesus going to hell was to go and basically forgive and bring back the people in God's kingdom at that time who died during the flood. There is, if you go into the I believe, you will read that Jesus went down to hell after his death in the creed of the apostles. Next time, give a little bit thought to that prayer.
Yeah, we'll have to read the Bible more in more depth. But
Yeah.
thank you, Glady. We appreciate all the information you have
Yeah.
presented. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
Glady, first time he killed everybody with the flood. Next time he killed with the fire. What is the next?
That I just said that so that you guys will have a little understanding. The next time he destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, that's another story.
Right. What is coming up now? Now we had water, we had flood, the fire.
All what is going to come, I think, is mentioned in the Revelation, and the Revelation is very scary. That will take another 1 hour for us to go through it. Of the 4 horsemen and all who comes, the Revelation is written in very codes. We really don't know. I too get confused when I read the Revelations. We don't know what God will do. Even Jesus said, when the end time comes, it will be a sunny day. There will be 2 people working in the field. Jesus will come, take away one and leave the other. That's what he meant. That means we will not know the end of the day, end of times. Jesus said, even I don't know the end of times, only the Father knows it. So I'm sorry, I will not know it. If Jesus doesn't know it, I will not know it.
Glady, you mentioned those 2 secrets and the third one, which what
our Mother Mary gave the 3 revelations to Saint Bernadette in her appearance in 1890, I think, in Lourdes, which is in France today.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 secrets she gave it to everyone, to the people. But the 3rd secret, she said that Mother Mary told to give it directly to the church and to expose that truth only after some years. So John Paul II opened that letter before his death and gave it to the press. And it was surprising that what was written in the letter was the corruption of the Vatican.
Yeah. What are the first 2?
I think I forgot about the first 2 were during the war, I think. Mother Mary had given about the war. That time the Second World War was just getting over. It was about the war and how people killed each other and all that. So something like that. I'm sorry, I don't know the first and second, but I know it's about the war.
But even the third one has not been publicized.
It isn't published. You can Google it. The 3rd letter of Saint Bernadette. You come to know the secret of John Paul exposed it. The Vatican, and that's how the previous Pope he resigned. No, there were reasons for him. The Vatican, basically the money part of Vatican is very corrupted. And that's the reason what you call the beast in the Harlem of Babylon, which you call the beast, is actually the church. Jesus told you that you did not have to have a mediator in prayer. You can go to a closed room and say a prayer to your God directly. You don't need middlemen. But the church put middlemen, Father, in between, saying that you have to do confession through the Father. The Father doesn't have the right to forgive your sins. Only God the Father and Jesus has the right to forgive your sins. No church father has a right to forgive your sins. So you doing confession to a father is not approved by God's words. The church has changed a lot of things which went against God's saying, like the Sabbath and all that. Even the Trinity, basically, we are still in confusion. What is the Trinity? Because the Trinity came only after the third century, third century. And it was the Arian fathers were against it. Father Arian was a bishop in Alexandria. They were all against it. The first Nicaea agreement had a lot of discussion on this. And that's the reason you had Christianity split into so many places where they did not believe Jesus as the Son of God. And that gave birth to another religion, which you call today Islam. Okay, if we have no questions, I think we can end it, and we should respect everyone's time. I think it was a great chance to present this, and I thank everyone for attending this.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you,
Glady. Great,
Thank you,
great.
Glady.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Happy
Thank
birthday
you.
once again.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.